Hi everybody, let me show you exactly what you need to do for lab number 2. And an easy way to get started is just to show you an example based on some other data. This example you have in the Excel file that you downloaded. I'm looking at this sheet right here that says example data. This is from a survey where I asked students a variety of questions about their financial situation. So as you scroll down, you can see there's a bunch of data for 50 different people. And I've labeled each one of the variables at the top: sex, age, class rank, GPA, and then we start getting into some questions about their finances, like if they have credit cards and the number of credit cards they have. One thing you'll notice is that some of the data is qualitative and some of the data is quantitative. Remember the difference. When we have quantitative data, that number right there represents some quantity. So it's a number with real numerical meaning. And the way you can really figure that out is by asking yourself, does that number mean 18 of something? And it does mean that that person has been alive for 18 years. So I know I'm dealing with quantitative data. And when we analyze our survey data and we have quantitative data, we're going to compute these analyses right here. We'll compute a minimum value, a maximum value, 3 different measures of central tendency: the mean, the median, and the mode, and then 1 measure of variability, the standard deviation. We will do that for all quantitative variables. You'll see though that some of the data is qualitative in nature. So for example, when I asked people their gender, they responded with one of 2 categories, male or female. And in our data set, we have numbers to represent those 2 categories, 1 for male or 2 for female. So I ask myself, does that 2 represent 2 of something? And it doesn't. 2 just represents the category female. So in this situation, I know I'm dealing with qualitative data. And when I'm dealing with qualitative data, for each question like that, I simply want to compute percentages. So in this case, the percentage of males and the percentage of females. This worksheet with the example data will be very helpful to you because not only can you see how I set things up, but you can also click on any cell and then look at the formula bar right up here to see which formulas, what functions I used within Excel to get those analyses. If you click on this sheet right here, Health Survey 2020, you will see our data. Your job is to compute the analyses underneath all of the data. I'll walk through a couple with you and then you can complete the rest. In this data file right here that you're viewing on this video, I have responses from 151 people. You're going to have more data in your data set, and that's because we're continuing to collect data as I create this video. So you're going to use the same techniques that I'm going to show you, but your numbers, your mean, your median, your mode, when you compute them, those values won't perfectly match mine because you will have more data. Let's make sure we understand what we're looking at. If I scroll all the way to the top, you can see I've put column headers that represent the question numbers. So one thing you're going to want to do is print the survey so that you can make sense of what is question number 7, what is question number 9. That's the only way to make sense of the numbers that you see in the spreadsheet. So let's take a quick look at the survey. You can see that question 1 wasn't really a question at all. It was just thanking the participants for participating in the study. And question number 2 was just seeing if people would agree to give their consent to participate. So our data really begins with question number 3. And it was at this point that we asked people how closely they watch what they eat. And you saw in that data set, there are only numbers. So in parentheses right here, it shows the code that appears in the data set. So if someone said, I often watch what I eat, in our data set, we see it too. If someone said, I never watch what I eat, in our data set, we would see a 4. So you need this survey close by so that you will know how to label up the analyses that we're conducting and so that you will be able to make sense of them. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way down, because what I consider one of the most efficient ways to do our analyses is to have those analyses right underneath the column of data for that particular question. And make sure you give yourself plenty of room. Do you see how here I have some labels for this data right here, for these analyses. And then I have labels right here for the data and the analyses for the next question. And it's really bunched together and it just makes it hard to read. So I can come right up here to where it says column C, and I'm going to right click using my right mouse key, and I'm going to insert another column. And then I can just click away and it'll turn off that highlighting. And it gives me much more room here. And you see, it's much more easy to read. I'm going to go back to the example data for a second. You see how there are spaces? Here's a space, here's a space. There are spaces between each of the questions, and it just makes it so much easier to read. So go ahead and give yourself some space as you're working. Back to our health survey. I'm going to show you here real quickly how I did question number 3, how I analyzed it. Remember, question 3 asked people how often they watch what they eat. Always, often, not often, never, or they don't know. So we're clearly dealing with qualitative data here. And when we're dealing with qualitative data, we know we need to compute percentages for each response category. We always start by computing the sample size, and right here when I click on that cell, you can see that I use the count command. And then over here I should be using the Countif command, and I am, because I'm counting if in this range from B2 to B152 every time it sees a 1. Every time Excel sees a 1, it will count it. It's then going to figure out how many people said they always watch what they eat. And then we're going to divide by cell B154. You'll see there in cell B154, it shows the number of people who responded to that question. So we'll take all the people who said they always watch what they eat, we'll divide by the number of people who responded to that question, and that way we can easily compute the percentage. As I scroll down, you'll see I'm using the exact same command, the Countif command, but here I'm counting up every time it sees a 2, every time it sees a 3, a 4, and a 5. And if I did that right, if I computed those percentages right for each one of those response options, they should sum up to 100%. So I always use the sum command, and I sum up these values right in here to check my work. Let's do that same thing over here for question 4. So we will walk through it together for this particular question, and then you should be able to do all of the other questions with qualitative data on your own. Let's look at the survey and remind ourselves what question 4 was all about. Question 4 asked, which best describes your opinion of how much you eat? I only eat as much as I should. That was code number 1. I rarely eat more than I should. That's code number 2. I sometimes eat more than I should. Code number 3. I often eat more than I should. Code number 4. And I have no idea. That's code number 5. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. You can see I already typed in the label names. I'm going to highlight them, click and highlight them, and I'm going to make them bold just so those labels stand out from the analyses we're about to compute. Now I'm going to just click somewhere else to turn off that highlighting. Do you see how this column width is too small to show the entire label without it bleeding over into the next cell? If I come up here and click and drag, I can just go ahead and make that column a little bit wider. You learned that stuff in lab number 1. Let's get started with our analyses. The first thing we're going to compute is the sample size. In other words, how many people responded to question number 4? I'm going to start by typing in equals, and we're using the count command. And as I type, Excel recognizes the count command. Once that count command is highlighted, if I hit the tab key, it will automatically open up the parentheses so that I can start editing that function. The data for question number 4 begins in E2, cell E2, and it goes all the way to cell E152. So I have E2 and then a colon. Remember, you need to make sure you have a colon there in the middle. E2 to E152. I'm going to close the parenthesis, and then I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. It counts up how many people responded to question number 4. If people selected that they eat only as much as they should, then in our data set, there is a code number 1. So I'm going to use the Countif command. Countif. I'm going to hit my tab key. It opens up the left parenthesis. I'm going to put in my range, E2 colon E152. Then I'm going to put a comma. Do you see how it's highlighted right here? It says put in the range. I already put in the range. Now I need to put in a comma to do the next thing. The next thing is Excel is asking, what criteria should I look for? What do you want me to actually count? I want it to count if it sees a 1, so I put in a 1. I'm now going to go ahead and close the parentheses. Now I want to take that value that it counts, and I want to divide it by the cell that counted up the total number of people that we have. Remember, that cell E154, it's this cell right here. In cell E154, it shows the total number of responses. So I don't want to type in 151. I want to type in the cell address. That's E154. So I'm dividing by cell E154. And do you see, once I type that in, it now highlights that cell. So I can see visually that I'm on the right track. Now I hit enter. Now it's going to show that as a proportion, 0.039. And I want it to show it as a percentage. So I simply go back up to that cell. I go to the Home tab, and I find where the percentage option is. So I simply tell it to display the number as a percentage. And there it is. We need to do that same thing here, 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 and here. And then we'll be done with that question. So let's walk through it a little bit more quickly. I'm going to type equals, Countif, hit my tab key so that I can edit it. The range is E2 colon E152. I'm going to put a comma. Excel needs to know, what should it count up now? I want it to count up every time it sees a 2. I'm going to close my parenthesis, and now I'm going to put a slash in there because that represents division, because I want it to take that number, the number of people who rarely eat more than they should, and divide by the total number of people who responded to that question. And that value is in cell E154. It highlights that. I know I'm on the right track. I hit enter, and it shows me the proportion of people who responded rarely. I'm going to go back up to that cell. I'm going to go to my Home tab, and then I'm going to hit percentage. At that point, I'm ready to move on to the next one. Now I want to count if it sees that someone listed that they sometimes eat more than they should. And that's code number 3. So we're looking at cell E2 all the way to E152. We want it to count every time it sees a 3. I'm going to close that parenthesis. And then I want to divide that number by cell E154. You see, once we get this down, it's really pretty easy. Hit enter. It's going to show that as a proportion. So it's somewhere around 53%. I'm going to click on that, go to my Home tab, and tell it to display it as a percentage. We're done. Let's go to the next one. Excel computed the proportion of people who said they have no idea. We're going to move back up to that cell, and we're going to format it as a percentage. Click away, and we're all done with that. Now, I want to check to make sure that all of those percentages sum to 100. Now, keep this in mind as well. This is based on 151 people. So where it says 3% right over there, it's not 3% exactly. It's rounded to 3%. Excel is simply displaying it as 3%. So if you were to just get out a calculator and add up those numbers, simply due to rounding error, it won't always equal 100% exactly, even when you're correct. That's why you should always, my friends, use Excel to add up those numbers. So I'm simply going to hit equals, and then I'm going to use the sum command. I'm going to open up my parentheses, and I'm simply going to highlight those values. You can type in that range. I just highlighted it. Remember, Excel provides lots of different ways to do the same thing. Once that range is in there, I'm going to hit enter, and there it did show that that equals 100%. So I'm very confident that I have done this correctly and that I've included all of the data. All right, so we've talked about several examples of what to do when you have qualitative data. You'll want to compute these percentages for each category. Let's go through an example real quickly of how to analyze the data when it's quantitative. Question number 8 right over here asked people how much they spend on average per year on diet products. And when we have quantitative data, we want to compute the minimum value, maximum value, mean, median, mode, and standard deviation. Let's go through an example where we do that together. The next question that I see that is quantitative in nature is question number 12. For question number 12, we ask people, on average, how many cigarettes they smoke per day. The good news is that I see lots of zeros in there. Let's go ahead and analyze that data. Keep in mind, copying and pasting is your friend. So I'm going to take these labels right here. I'm going to copy them. I like to hit Control-C. I'm going to move them over where I need them, right before question number 12. And I'm going to paste them in. I like to hit Control-V. So I save myself a lot of time that way. I can hit the Escape key to turn off those marching ants over there, and I can just click away to turn off the highlighting. Now remember, this is all tight in here. There are going to be some analyses right in here, and here are the labels. So I'm going to give myself another column. I'm going to come up to where it says column U, right click, and say Insert. Click away, turn off that highlighting. Let's move up here. Let's use the count command, equals count, to count up how many people responded to question number 12. You can see that we are now in column W. So my data starts in W2 and it ends in W152. Close the parenthesis, hit enter. 151 people responded to that question. Now we're going to compute the minimum number of cigarettes that people smoke. We can already see it's going to be 0. I'm going to type in equals. We're going to use the min function. I start typing in MIN, and Excel recognizes that. Because min is highlighted, I can just hit my tab key at this point. Now I need to type in the range. The range goes from W2 all the way to W152. I can close that parenthesis and then hit enter, and it computed the minimum value. Let's compute the maximum value, equals max. That is the Excel function. Excel recognizes it. I'm going to hit my tab key. For me, that's just the easiest way to open it up for editing. And the range is the same, W2 all the way to W152. Close your parenthesis, hit enter, and we can see the maximum value is 200 cigarettes. Now, the question asked about how many cigarettes you smoke on average per day. That seems kind of unbelievable. I don't smoke, but I think there are like 20 cigarettes in a pack. That would be 10 packs per day. My thought is that somebody didn't understand the question. Maybe they thought it was how many cigarettes per week. But at this point, that's our data. Let's just do our analyses. Let's compute the average number of cigarettes smoked per day. We're going to use the average command. Of course, an average and a mean are the same thing. So Excel recognizes the average function. I'm going to hit tab so that I can edit it. I'm going to put in the range W2 colon W152. Close the parentheses, hit enter. There's our average value. Let's compute the median value. We're going to use the function name median. Excel recognizes it. I hit tab. I put in my range W2 all the way to W152. Close the parenthesis, hit enter. The median value is 0. Remember, that's the middle value if you were to line up all the values from the smallest to the highest. Next, we'll compute the mode. So I type in equals. The function name that we're going to use is mode. There are a couple different options because remember, there can be more than one mode in our data set, but we're simply going to use the general mode command, MOD. You can either scroll down and then hit tab, or remember, you can just double click as well. I'll double click this time. Once I double click, I'm able to edit that function. I need to put in the range W2 all the way to W152. Close my parentheses, hit enter, and the mode is 0. And then finally, let's compute the standard deviation. Equals, start typing in STDEV. You can see that Excel recognizes several functions that begin with that. We want this one right here, STDEV.S. That's going to compute the standard deviation based on sample data. I'm going to click on it. If I double click on it, it opens up the parentheses so that I can edit it. Again, we need to put in the range W2 colon W152, close the parenthesis, hit enter, and now we've computed the standard deviation. So every time you have quantitative data for a question, you will want to compute these analyses. All right, now you should have a good idea of how to finish these basic analyses. So in the end, Your analyses for this health survey should look a lot like my analyses for this example survey. After you're done with those basic analyses, there's one more thing that I want you to do. You will need to do 2 group versus group analyses. You can select any 2 groups that you'd like to compare. It's very easy to compare the males to the females, so I'm going to do that in this example. And then you can also pick any question you want to compare those groups on. I'm going to use question number 3, the question that asked how often people watch what they eat. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to do it in a new worksheet. All that we really need for the analysis is question number 3. That's the question that asked people how often they watch what they eat. And question number 14. That's the question that asked people if they're male or female. You can see I got rid of all of the other questions on this particular sheet just so we can focus on those 2 and it's much easier to read. Let me show you how to do it. First, we need to go back to our health survey data. What we want to do is copy that worksheet. We don't want to screw up any of the analyses that we did, so we're simply going to copy that sheet into a new worksheet. So I right-click on the sheet name, and I'm going to select Move or Copy. I want to copy the sheet. So I select Move or Copy. It now asks me where I want to put the new copy. I'm going to tell it to move it to the end. And this is very important. You have to click on Create a Copy. If you don't select Create a Copy, it will simply move the sheet. It will not create a copy of the sheet. So once I select Create a Copy, then I select OK. And you can see it created a copy right here, and I'm already in it. I'm now going to right-click on that sheet name, and I'm going to rename that sheet because I want to make sure I don't confuse it with any other sheets. We might as well name that sheet something descriptive. This is going to be an analysis of how people watch what they eat. So watch, eat by their sex or by their gender. I mentioned that there are only 2 questions that we really need to save in this worksheet. And all the rest of them, we can just get them out of our way. So I'm going to scroll all the way over to the left. And I'm simply going to save question number 3, which we have right over here, and question number 14. All of the rest of it, I'm going to delete. So I'm going to go up to the column letters, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold my mouse key in, and I'm going to start dragging to the right. And as I drag to the right, it highlights those columns. Now I want to save question number 14 and its label. So I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'm going to lift up, and now I'm going to right click and say delete. And do you see how it got rid of everything in between? And I also don't need any of this data for question 15, 16, and 17. So I'm going to get rid of that as well. So I'm going to again click. I'm left clicking, in this case on this column F, and I'm going to drag all the way over to column L or so. That highlights all of the data that I want to get rid of. I'm now going to right click somewhere in that highlighted section and say delete. And now it got rid of all that. I can just click away and turn off that highlighting. Do you see now that all that's left is question number 3 and question number 14? And you don't need to worry. It's not like we lost anything because in this original spreadsheet right here, that's where all of our health data is. We haven't lost anything. All right, back to this sheet that we're working on. Let's scroll all the way to the top because we're going to need to create a couple new columns. What I want to do is see how the men and the women differ on that question. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space. I'm going to create a column for the males. I'll just title it males, and I'll create a column for the females. I'll title that females. So that we don't get confused, I'm just going to change this name, change this column label from question 14 to gender. Now we'll be able to look at it and really know exactly what it is. What we want to do is use an Excel command, and we're going to use the if command, which you used for lab number 1. We want to use an Excel command to identify if the particular person in question is a male or a female. If that person is a male, in this particular case, we're going to want to take that person's score on question number 3 and move it to this column. If this person is a female, we would want to take their score on question number 3 and move it to this column. Let me show you how we'll do that. So I'm going to start right over here, and I'm going to type in equals if. So we're going to use that if function. I type tab so that I can start editing that function. You might remember that the if function begins with a test. If this test is true, it will do the next thing that we type into the command. And if this test is not true, it will do the second thing that we type into the command. Let me show you what I mean. We want to test to see if this person is a male. Right here it shows the person's gender, male or female. 1 is male, 2 is female. So I want to test if E2, that's the person's gender, equals 1. If E2 equals 1, that means that that person is a male. I'm now going to hit a comma. Excel wants to know now, what should it do if it's true that that person is a male? If that person is a male, we want to take this score for question number 3 and copy it to this cell right here. All I need to do is tell it this cell address, B2. Type B2 into that formula. So if this person is a male, it will take this value 2 and it'll copy it to this cell. Now hit your comma. Excel needs to know what should it do if that person is not a male. If that person is not a male, if the person is female, what we want it to do is leave that blank. The way we can tell Excel to leave that cell blank is by using 2 quotes. I now close my parenthesis and hit enter. Now before I hit enter, let's predict what's going to happen. This person is a male. So because this is true, that E2 equals 1, it should do the next thing in the function, in the command. And it says take the value B2 and copy it right here. So when I hit enter, we should see a 2. I hit enter and we do see a 2. Now we're going to use essentially the same command over here for the column for females. I'm going to begin with if. Now we're going to test to see if that person is a female. I hit my tab key so that we can start editing that command. I want to test to see if E2, that's where the gender information is, equals 2. It's testing to see if the person is a female. Put a comma. If that person is indeed a female, what do we want it to do? We want it to take that person's score for question number 3 and copy it to this cell. So again, I just type in B2. That will copy the value in B2 to this cell right here. I then hit comma. Now Excel wants to know, what should it do if E2 does not equal 2? What should it do if that test is false? And if that person is not a female, we want to leave that cell blank. How do we tell it to leave that cell blank? 2 quotes. Close your parenthesis, hit enter. What's going to happen when we hit enter? This person is a male. This person's not a female. So it should skip this part of the formula right here and move on to the quote quote. In other words, it should be blank. I hit enter and it's blank. Now the cell is blank, but if you click on it, you can see there's a formula there. Same thing here. You can see there's a formula here. All that we need to do now is highlight these 2 cells. And you can see I'm highlighting them. I'm not using any autofill yet. I'm just clicking in the middle and highlighting those 2 cells. And now I'm going to autofill them all the way down. It's going to copy those formulas all the way down. See how it keeps changing its shape? Once I get on that autofill handlebar, I click with my left mouse button, just a typical mouse click. I hold it and I drag it down. I want to drag it all the way down. So keep holding it down, keep holding it down, keep holding it down. Drag it down just as far as you need it and then lift up. And then automatically, you can see that Excel took this data and it split it out appropriately into columns for males and females. If I click somewhere else, I can turn off the highlighting. And now we can check our work. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way to the top. We can see that this person is a male, and it took this person's value for question number 3, and it put it over here. This person is a male. It took the person's value for question number 3, and again, it put it over here in the column for the males. But look at this person. This person is a female. It took her value for question number 3, and it put it in this column for females. So in other words, it's doing exactly what we want it to do. It's splitting out the data on question 3 based on if someone is a male or a female. Now let's go ahead and scroll all the way back down. And now we will analyze the data separately for the males and the females. When we autofill down, it messes up our border here. I'm just going to highlight those two cells and put that border back in. Click away, and we can see it's back in. Now, here you're going to see the beauty of copying and pasting. I want to analyze the data for the males and for the females. And remember, we already analyzed the data for all of the people put together right here. We're going to use these exact same commands. So I'm going to highlight the labels. I'm going to copy them, Control C. I'm going to move to where I want it. I want it right before where my analyses will be, so I'll paste them in right here. It looks like that column needs to be widened just a little bit, so I'm going to do that right over here. Then I'm going to click away somewhere to turn off that highlighting. And to turn off these marching ants, I'm going to hit my Escape key on my keyboard. Then I'm going to copy these analyses right here. These analyses were done for all of the 151 people, all of the males and females put together. I'm going to hit Control C again. I'm going to move over to where I want to paste that in. And now I'm going to paste it in for the males by hitting Control V. And then I'll do the same thing again by just moving over one column to the right. I will hit Control V to now paste in those commands for the females. Again, I'm just going to click away somewhere to turn off that highlighting. And to turn off these marching ants that you see right here, I'm going to hit the Escape key on my keyboard. And you should be able to see that it makes sense. There were 25 males and 126 females. So lots more females than males. But 25 plus 126 should equal 151, and it does. That makes sense. That ensures that we're actually accounting for all of the males and all of the females. And then take some time to take a look at the data. This is where things get interesting. I would have thought that females would be much more likely to watch what they eat always or often. Now, when you look at always, the females are indeed more likely. But when you look at these together, always and often, about 50% of the women are always or often watching what they eat. But look over here at the males. When you look at always and often, about the same amount, 52% are always or often watching what they eat. So that was surprising to me because I thought I would find different results. I want you to do the same type of analysis. I want you to do 2 of these group versus group analyses. You can't do the one that I just did. You need to use some different variables. You can continue to use gender as your grouping variable if that's what you'd like to do, but make sure you pick some other question to separate to see if there are differences between the males and the females. Good luck with this assignment. If you have any questions, just send me some email. Take care. Be safe.